Part 3. A stagecoach galloped away from the fortress city. It was a large vehicle that could comfortably seat 6 people, pulled by a quartet of horses. The disk of the full moon shone in the night sky, illuminating the land with surprising brightness. That said, racing at full speed through the night was still a foolish course of action. The wisest course of action would have been to pitch tents, light lanterns, and post sentries while they spent the night here. The world at night was not under mankind's control. No, that would not be entirely accurate. No place without light could be considered part of humanity's world. The night concealed all manner of animals, demi-humans, and monsters. Many creatures possessed the gift of dark vision, and these creatures often attacked humanity. Still, the passengers in the stagecoach barely felt their vehicle galloping through the perilous night. This was not because of good shock absorbers or the like, but because the coach was traveling along a cobblestoned road. The paving of roads had begun after the suggestion of the Golden Princess, but the only places where it had been completed were in those domains held by the crown and by Marquis Raven, one of the 6 great nobles. This was because the other nobles protested this gesture, feeling that such roads would only benefit the empire when they attacked the kingdom. The maintenance costs for those roads had also sparked much debate. The reason why Princess Rena had reached out to traders to foot the bill was because the nobles in charge of the areas through which the roads passed were dragging their feet on the matter. Thus, the paving work was in this a sad state of affairs. Since this region was not too far from Erantal, which was administered by the crown, the work here was of quite a high standard. Still, it was not perfect. The wagon wobbled a little as it traveled along the street, and some faint vibrations made their way to the passengers. These tremors terminated the conversation between the occupants of the vehicle. Among these occupants were Sebas, with Solution by his side. Opposite him was Shaltir, flanked by 2 of the vampire brides who were her minions cum concubines. Zack was obviously driving the wagon from the driver's seat. A brief silence filled the air inside the wagon, and then at great length, Sebas spoke to break it. "There is one thing I have been meaning to ask you for a while." What do you have in mind? I notice that you and Aura-sama do not get along very well. Is there any particular reason for that? Actually, I feel we do get along quite well. As Shaltir answered quietly, she stared at the nail of her pinky finger, as though bored. The pearly white fingernail was about 2 centimeters long. Although she had a file in hand, the nail looked quite neatly trimmed, so there was no need to work further on it. Shaltir also felt that further action was unnecessary, so she tossed the file to one of the vampire brides by her side. After that, she made to grope the breasts of the vampires beside her with her now empty hands. However, when she noticed the expressions on the 2 people in front of her, she retracted her hands, a somewhat embarrassed look on her face. "It does not seem that way," Sebas continued. Shaltir's face wrinkled up, like she had eaten something bitter, and then she replied, "I think we do get along. I simply tease her a little because my creator, Peroncino-sama, designed me to feud with her. Still, there is no real enmity there. Perhaps Uchigama-sama designed that girl to not get along with me as well." Shaltir waved her hand, as though she were very bored, and then met Tsubasa's gaze for the first time. "Speaking of which, my creator Peroncino-sama and that girl's creator Uchigama-sama were elder sister and younger brother. So in that sense, she and I are also sisters. A sibling relationship, I see." In the past, Peroncino-sama discussed the matter with other supreme beings Lucifer-sama and Nishiki-Enrai-sama when they came to my domain. A look of reverence crept into Shaltir's eyes as she recounted her memories of accompanying these exalted personages. Peroncino-sama once mentioned that Bukabuka Chigama had the profession of a seiyuu. So popular was she that she even lent her talents to things called eroges. So whenever he purchased a game he eagerly anticipated, he would end up thinking of his sister's face and he would lose his motivation. Shaltir added that she did not know what he meant by that. A somewhat baffled Sebas tilted his head and said, "A seiyuu. I remember that seems to be a line of work which involves the use of sound. It seems they are skilled in singing, so perhaps it should be similar to a bard." After hearing Sebas's answer, Shaltir laughed, like the tinkling of silver bells, and replied in the negative. "That is not the case." "It is not? How so?" "I once heard Bukabuka Chigama-sama say that being a seiyuu meant giving a soul through sound. In other words, a seiyuu is a job which creates life." "Oh, I see. It seems I was laboring under a grave misconception. Thank you very much for your correction, Shaltir-sama." Sebas and all the others created by the Supreme Beings were infused with knowledge upon their creation, but that was all they had. Because they did not know real life, amusing mishaps sometimes occurred. Like, say, making a mistake about their revered master's jobs. Feeling terribly uncomfortable, Sebas muttered to himself, engraving the meaning of being a seiyuu into his heart so he would not make the same mistake again. "There's no need to take it to heart." Right, Sebas, since we are fellow travelers, there's no need to be so formal. "Is that so, Shaltir-sama?" "Don't address me as Sama. We are all servants of the Supreme Beings. They may have handed down our positions and set some of us over others, but the truth is that we all basically the same." She had the right of it. Solution was only obeying Sebas because she had been ordered to do so. Originally, she and Sebas were of the same status. "I understand, Shaltir. Then, I shall address you in this way from now on." "That's good to hear. Come to think of it, you don't get along with Demiurge either, do you?" Sebas remained silent. Shaltir narrowed her eyes, like a playful child, and continued asking, "The Supreme Beings did not design you that way, so why is that?" "I wonder. The truth is, I don't know why that is the case as well. It must be some sort of instinct that makes me dislike him. However, the same should apply to him as well. It doesn't seem that way to me. Still, it might be because the feelings of our creators, the Supreme Beings, were deeply engraved within our hearts. That is very likely to be the case." Shaltir carefully studied Sebas, who nodded to her. Then, after considering his position, Shaltir felt that he would know the answer to the question which had long hidden in her heart. "What kind of people are found in the 8th floor?" "I know about Victim, but who else is there besides him?" Sebas frowned at the sudden query. He looked at Shaltir, a stern expression on his face, trying to discern what she was up to. From where she was seated to the side, Solution's expression changed as well, though it was subtle enough that the others did not notice. In the past there were fools who defied the Supreme Beings and invaded Nazarick, breaching the defenses of the 7th floor. However, they did not reach the 9th floor, where the Supreme Beings resided. That being the case, they must have been stopped at the 8th floor, right? Though I do not have any recollection of the event. The opposition must have brought fearsome fighting power with them to make it that far in, so I believe they were halted with equally extraordinary might. However, I have no idea who intercepted the intruders. No, Albedo should know. After all, she is the guardian overseer of Nazarick. It would be strange if she did not know that. As though ignoring the silence Sebas, Shaltir continued asking, "It's kind of annoying to hear she's one step ahead of me. What sort of mysterious beings are found on the 8th floor? Characters personally crafted by Ains Sama, perhaps?" Sebas was made by Touch Me. Demiurge was made by Albert Allen Odell. Cositus was made by warrior Takumi Kazuchi. However, even Shaltir did not know what sort of NPC that Ainzel Monga, the highest ranked of the 41 supreme beings, had created. Surely he had created somebody, right? That being the case, it was reasonable to conclude that this mysterious character resided on the 8th floor, about which Shaltir had no knowledge. No, that should not be the case. This is just a rumor, but I heard that the NPC Ainz created is called Pandora's Actor, and his strength is comparable to the rest of us Guardians. Apparently, he defends the depths of the treasury. Does someone like that really exist? Unlike Albedo, Shaltir had not been infused with knowledge about everyone in Nazarick. Therefore, this name was new to her. Granted, the treasury was a place which one could only enter with the Ring of Ainz-Ul-Gaon, but it would be strange to leave it unguarded. The depths of the treasury. All of the highest-end magic items that Ainz-Ul-Gaon had collected were stored in there. It was also said that it contained several world-class items. That being the case, it was the most suitable location for the NPC created by the greatest of the 41 supreme beings, Ainz, to defend. Shaltir's pride was somewhat bruised as she considered that she had not been chosen to guard such exalted ground, but she consoled herself with the thought that it was unavoidable. To Shaltir, keeping intruders from straying beyond the 3rd floor was also a crucial task, every bit as important as protecting the treasury. And now, her master had given her another vital task. Indeed, but I have not seen that person before. After all, one cannot travel to that place without a ring. Oh. Shaltir's answer was devoid of energy, as though she had lost all interest in the whole thing. However, Sebas did not seem to mind. Still, the 8th floor is a mysterious place. It's kind of a shame. Indeed. After all, it is a place that even we cannot enter. There must be something inside. And what exactly is that something? Could it be there's a trap in there which might even attack us? That's not a bad idea, though, if I had to guess. Could it be a death trap that indiscriminately kills anyone who enters it? The Great Tomb of Nazarick was handcrafted by the Supreme Beings, and defended by us, who have pledged our lives in service. Anyone who could penetrate an impregnable fortress like that and breach the 7th floor would probably not be stopped by a trap like that. Do you want to take a look? Shaltir had a smile on her face, like a child up to some mischief. Sebas's smile was the same as always, but there was a certain nuance to it now. Do you intend to defy Ainz-Sama's wishes? Just kidding, just kidding. It was just a joke, no need to look so scary. Shaltir. Curiosity killed the cat. We should wait quietly until Ainz-Sama tells us otherwise. You've got a point there. Then, has our prey taken the bait? Sebas did not ask about the sudden change in topic. Instead he directly replied, yes, they've fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. All we need to do is reel them in. Shaltir nodded slightly, and then she lightly licked her lips. Her crimson pupils blazed. Sebas immediately realized what would put Shaltir in a mood like that. Sensing that this was the perfect time to do so, he decided to bring up Solution's request from earlier. I have a request to make concerning this matter, Shaltir. What is it? The reply was one of annoyance, given that Sebas had jolted Shaltir out of her delight over what was soon to unfold. As though to comfort her, Sebas continued. Could you give the driver of our coach to this girl? Is he an underling? Indeed. He seems to be a messenger of sorts. Shaltir closed her eyes and pondered the request. After considering several possibilities, she seemed to have come to a conclusion, and she nodded. That should be fine. Besides, he doesn't look like he'd taste good if I fed on him. You have my sincerest thanks for your generosity, Shaltir. Thank you, Shaltir-sama. Ah, you're welcome. Think nothing of it. Shaltir was quite surprised by how tenderly Solution smiled to her. She had not expected such a sincere expression. Then, Shaltir composed herself and turned to Sebas. Then, we're even for that little mistake of mine just now. I understand. In truth, I didn't expect you to do anything quite as foolish as that. It was merely a jest, was it not? Indeed, you're right. If you had said such a thing, Sebas, I would have taken it as a joke as well. Then I would have my subordinates watch you in silence. At the first sight of any treachery on your part, I would remove your limbs and have your torso dragged in chains before Ain-sama. I'm hardly as ruthless as you are, Shaltir. No. Things like that only make me doubt your loyalty more. You would do that too, wouldn't you? Sebas and Shaltir locked eyes, and smiled from the bottoms of their hearts. Besides, I like cute girls the best. There might be a different sort of entertainment in giving him to Solution. Then, how do you intend to capture them? Through paralysis, or hold person? Before they had set out for Erantal, Ains had given Sebas an order. I want to capture humans who know martial arts or magic. However, you will only go after criminals whose absence will go unnoticed. Therefore, Solution and Sebas had played the role of a stuck-up, stubborn heiress and her easily bamboozled butler, with the intention of hooking a fish like Zack. Shaltir's mission, on the other hand, was to use a fish like that to net the entire school which followed him. Why would I go to such great lengths? Ain-sama did say that it was all right to drain them dry and turn them into slaves. The important things was that I absolutely had to capture them. Still, investigating a mole one by one would be a hassle, so I might as well just suck them all dry. Sebas did not speak the words in his heart. I see, but instead nodded. Still, he had to acknowledge that he was not entirely comfortable with Shaltir's interpretation of her orders. With that in mind, Sebas could not help but say, from that point of view, Demiurge-sama would be the most suitable for that sort of work. After all, he can control his opponent's thoughts, much like Aura-sama can with her breath. Demiurge possessed a skill known as Command Mantra. It was a powerful mind-affecting ability which would be invaluable during a capture operation like this. Ha! Shaltir exclaimed in an unbelievably low tone. The mood within the coach turned grim immediately, as though a fog of bone-chilling cold hung in the air. Even the horses pulling the coach seemed to have sensed this, because the vehicle suddenly lurched. The bloodless faces of the vampire brides flanking Shaltir turned even paler than usual, while Solution shuddered in her place beside Sebas. Even Sebas, whose might should have been on par with Shaltir's, could feel goosebumps breaking out on him. This was the murderous intent emitted by the strongest of Nazarik's floor guardians. The hostility which wreathed her made her previous spats with Aura seem like child's play. If the situation was mishandled, it might lead to a life-or-death melee. As Shaltir chilled the air ever further, the color of her crimson pupils began to spill out into her sclera, dyeing her eyes red as though they were filling with blood. Sebas, could you say that again? Or are you saying that a dragonoid like yourself, in that form, wants to? Her eyeballs, now completely red, twitched. Wants to start a fight with me? I misspoke, please forgive me. I was merely a little uneasy. It would be fine as long as your blood frenzy doesn't kick in. Shaltir's response was silence. Sebas could tell that the brief silence was a sign of her unease toward herself. In YGGDRASIL, strong classes were typically balanced out with weaknesses and penalties. One of the penalties Shaltir suffered from was called blood frenzy. The more fresh blood that covered her body, the greater her urge to slaughter. While this made her stronger, in return she would no longer be able to control her actions. The reason why Ains had made use of Shaltir for this mission, who might have ended up ignoring orders or even going berserk, was due to a process of elimination. Albedo had to remain in the Great Tomb of Nazarick in Ains's absence, and among the two remaining guardians, Shaltir and Cositus, Shaltir looked more like a human being from a distance. After that, Shaltir took several deep breaths. She seemed to be trying to suck her anger back up, or perhaps she was trying to quell the uneasiness in her heart. With her last breath, Shaltir resumed her normal expression, an attractive young girl with a seductive air about her, and her pupils returned to their original color. For the most part, they'll become my slaves after I drain their blood, which should make things simple. Besides, we don't need to bring them back alive. Ains-sama brought it up before as well. Also, I will definitely keep my blood frenzy under control. Vampires were a species which could drain a victim's blood and turn them into perfectly loyal minions. Most vampires could only create unintelligent, lesser vampires in this way, but the vampires which Shaltir could make had nearly as much intelligence as a normal human. As long as one did not care if the prey was alive or dead, Shaltir qualified as quite a good hunter, although the number of vampires she could create was limited. That's right, so there's no need to say more. I will accomplish the mission Ains-sama gave me without fail. So he will praise me with, "Well done, Shaltir, you are my most important slave," and then say, "You are the one most worthy of standing by my side." Please forgive my shallow comments. Tsubas's apology was sincere and came from the heart. It was not just directed to Shaltir, but to someone else. I did not realize that my statements were a slight on Ains-sama, who chose you for this task, and I apologize for that as well. I hope you will forgive me for displeasing you. Then, he bowed to Solution and the vampire bride's in apology. Just then, the coach shuddered, and they heard neighing from the horses which drew the vehicle. It seems we have stopped. Indeed. Shaltir lost as she was in fantasies of the praise her master would lavish on her once she succeed in her task, returned to her senses. She smiled, like a girl who had just thought up a wonderful prank to play. Tsubasa too was stroking his mustache as he smiled.